we on?
Yeah, we're on. We're on.
Wow.
Yep. Faded in. We're here. We're on.
This didn't work.
Okay, so welcome to Roll for Effort. And this is the first of our new Talking Head series that we're going to be doing.
Yes.
Yeah. Tonight we're going to start. So we're going to start doing a series of videos like this, and they're going to change out. Basically, every week you're going to get a new talking head like this. Hopefully, knock on wood. And tonight we're going to start off with a discussion about RPG leadership.
What did you have in mind with this topic, Jason?
Yeah. So, in my experience, everybody has problems at their tables that no one wants to talk about, right? Where you've got a player who's giving you a headache, or there's some kind of social thing that's going on that's really difficult to sort of figure out. And people ask other folks like us on YouTube channels all the time, like, how do I deal with this problem player and that kind of thing? And they always get sort of the same generic answer of like, well, just talk to them like an adult and it'll be okay, you know, or work it out, or you may have to just quit the game and that kind of thing. And frankly, that's a half thought out bullshit answer, because the reality is this kind of thing happens all the time in businesses all around the world. You have an employee that's really hard to deal with, and players are not employees. I'm not saying that, but the fact is there are ways of dealing with people to smooth out these sorts of issues, and they all boil down to leadership.
And leadership.
Yeah, and to me, that's what this is about, right? So I want to talk a lot now and in the future about showing really good leadership at the table and why it's important.
And it's definitely, I just want to add real quick, you know, here I am in the meeting, interrupting, like a bad leader.
Bad employee.
I do want to point out, like, and it's, you know, just for anybody curious, it's not necessarily leadership just from the game master's standpoint. There's also leadership that is, you know, in ample, not just requirement, but in usage, I guess, by players as well. Like it's both sides of the screen, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when you say leadership, though, Jason, do you mean like in terms of all the time, or just when trying to solve problems, interpersonal issues?
Honestly, I think that really good leadership is an all the time thing, because
even when everyone's simpatico and everyone's just trying to collaboratively tell a story.
Yeah, so this is a really great point. Okay, so when we talk about leadership, we don't just mean like being in control, right? There's a common misunderstanding. When we think leader, we think somebody who's in control of the situation, and that's not always the case. You can be a great leader as a player just by showing a great example to the other people at your table.
Yes.
Right? So
I totally agree there.
Yeah, so it's an all the time thing, right? Like you're all the time, the way you act, you're sending messages to other people at your table about what is the best way, you know, like how do we communicate socially? Like, is this okay? Do we all use really, you know, bad language all the time? Is it okay to make, you know, this kind of joke? You know, there are all these things that are bundled into it that affect the way that everyone acts or they think is okay to act. And so, yeah, I think leadership is an all the time gig.
Yeah, but it's also, you know, I don't see it as it's always one person, or necessarily even always the same person within one game setting. You know, since we are kind of in that topic of role-playing games and at the table, like, I mean, the thought of leadership and the aspect of being a leader at the table can most certainly move from player to player throughout the game. Like it's more of a, at least in my mind, it feels like it's more of a fluid dynamic of how play is looked at, or how gameplay is approached. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
stopping myself before I ramble.
No, it's okay. Isn't that what you're supposed to do at a talking head video anyway? Just a ramble.
So what about all that age old advice that every DM on YouTube is telling you about, pulling the person aside, talking to him like an adult? Does that not actually work ever?
I think it does. But more so, I think that's more on a situational aspect. I think some things when they maybe reach more of a personal level than a game level, it's more of a moment when you want to privately, have a one-on-one, conversation. And conversation is the key word there. Like, it's not just a talking at somebody. Like, it's a fluid exchange between both parties. But as far as like regular stuff at the table, I think that's a different scenario. There's things that can be handled at the table just fine. But some things, if they hit a certain level of a personal issue, which differs from person to person, those are moments when I think it has to pull aside and be a one-on-one.
Yeah, and so that's why this is such a fertile topic, and why I think we're going to end up talking about this a lot for a long, long time. Like, humans do not like being told that they're wrong, typically, right? And that advice of pulling somebody aside and then basically explaining to them how they're wrong, what kind of emotion does that invoke in them? And there are cases like what Joe was just talking about, where that is 100% what you're going to have to do, but before you get to that point, there are so many things that you can do by showing good leadership, either as a player or as a DM, that may prevent things from ever even getting to that point. Because by the time you're at that point, something is already broken in the group or at the table, right? And so this is this is why I think this is a really huge topic for the community. And it's like, to me, it's like the dark continent of RPGs. It's something that no one really like associates or talks to or about. And I think that's just an absolute rich.
Well, I feel like when I go into forums and things like, these groups on Facebook and on Reddit, they're often talking about interpersonal issues. It seems like to be a really big topic because people like to share horror stories, and then they like to share their 2 cents on how to solve something like that. But no one has the same answer,
Yeah. It's certainly an art that can be explored for a long time, and when I think to myself, like, what does a leader do? If you're a DM that's being a leader, or you're a player that's being a leader, good leaders at the table help players or DMs. They help them feel safe, in the environment. They help them learn new things, like, how do I do this? How do I play? What's the best way to approach this role playing or this kind of task? They help each other feel valued.
Right? Yeah, I hate to bring it up, but I saw this video. I think it was about a year ago now. It was Matt Mercer teaches or sits down with Steve Colbert, and like they play around or something. I only watched the first 15 minutes, but you could just tell how much of a professional Matt Mercer was, because he was kind of calming Colbert down. Like, Colbert was frankly a bit nervous and was sort of jittery because he hadn't played D&D in 25 years or something. And Matt Mercer was that calming person who was trying to just tell him the rules of the new edition and just kind of walking him along. I thought that was a really good example of what you were talking about.
Yeah, that's actually, I remember that video. That is a great example of in that sense, being a leader at the table, where it's that calming sense that everything's gonna be okay. We're playing a game. Let me show you the ropes, and then we're both gonna jump in and have fun with it. Like, this is how it's done. Now let's do it.
Yes, and you need these kinds of players in your group or DMs at your table, because they are, a lot of groups fall apart, right? Because things come up, conflicts like this come up that just can't be resolved. because they already reached that point where they're breaking down. And this kind of activity, it's going to make your group more resilient. So that when conflicts come up, they're going to be easier to manage. Which means that in the end, running your table is going to be easier.
Right. And I do want to point out real quick, to everybody watching, we're not actually talking about just like small disagreements, because friends are going to disagree. That's going to happen. We don't all agree on everything. Like, if we did, how fucking boring would that be? Oh, sorry. We'll edit that out of postscript.
Nah, probably not. It's okay.
Seriously, things would be boring if everybody always liked all the same things. I mean, that's just a boring thing. But this is, I think, more of a, in reference to a lot of like those, Reddit and all these other, different channels of chatting and dialogues where people are talking about these problem players. I think those are all more of those disruptive elements that are kind of beyond just a simple argument between friends. Like it isn't on something on like a small scale like that. It's the people that are kind of, I guess, actively pushing to maybe not necessarily break things, but maybe they're interested in a different kind of fun than everybody else at the table.
Yeah,
I don't want to go as far as to say toxic, because I mean that's a whole other issue all in itself. But in the aspect of that original or that initial question of the player that's giving headaches, or that player that's just over talking everybody and things like that, I think those are issues that are just a little bit more than something as simple as a friendly argument.
Yeah, yeah, and that's going to help. You're going to be making better decisions about when to do things. All these little sub-social things that are we don't even actively thinking about it. All of that is made better by having good leaders in your group. And honestly, personally, I think with just about every group and country out there, eventually things either stand or fall based on whether or not you have good leaders involved.
Right? Ooh, poignant, political.
Yeah.
Nice.
Political or not, I mean, but it's the same in the table, right? Like the cosm of your table, right? If you don't have people at your table, whether they're your players or yourself or your DM, showing leadership to each other, making each other feel safe and valued, and all of these things, if you don't have that, your game is doomed.
All right, and it could be. I mean, there are simple ways to kind of do that. I mean, for example, like overtalkers, which I have to admit, I definitely have that problem sometimes. I have one of those brains where an idea will pop in, and I get so excited about the idea, I just jump in and overtalk somebody because I have to get it out in case I forget it. Like, it's a personal habit of mine that I try to overcome a lot. But in that scenario of the overtalker, it's one player's turn and somebody else just keeps jumping in and jumping in. In that moment, a leader at the table could just throw a thing out, which might turn into an encounter. Who knows? But a leader at the table could be like, wait, shh, quiet. Do you hear that? And then all of a sudden the tables calm down. And as everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. Did we miss something? What did I miss? And then all of a sudden everybody's paying attention. And it's not a way to, call a player out and basically tell them like, hey, dude, shut up. Like it's a more gentle kind of natural, I guess, take on it, where it keeps it in the game, but kind of affects the table as a whole, where everybody's like, whoa, did I miss something?
Yeah.
What's going on here? And then all of a sudden the focus is pulled back at the game. And something small like that can be one of those instances of being a leader at the table, in some small measure, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm rambling again.
No, it's great.
What it sounds like to me, and I'm able to draw a connection to all these things, is that leadership is one word to describe what you're talking about, both of you, but another word would actually be empathy.
Yes.
If you don't have, and I'm talking about, yeah, empathic connection, like to actually feel or simulate in your head what another person's feeling. Like
Right.
that's what this is, right? What Matt Mercer's doing is he's understanding the fear of not knowing the rules, and likewise with all these other examples, it's just about empathy.
And that is actually something we should talk about in a future vid, because empathy is one of the cornerstones of good leadership. And I think you nailed it, Dave. Like, people who have really strong natural empathy tend to be really strong natural leaders. And leadership, like everything, it's there are people who are just really good at it naturally, but it is also can be a skill that you can work at and develop for yourself.
Most certainly.
So there's hope for us. Some of us are not so good at leadership, naturally. And there's always room to kind of grow and improve. So that's another big reason why I think we should be talking about this a lot in the future, because that will help us develop our own inner selves better along those lines.
Yeah, definitely. Man, that's a great point. Like, it is like really right up there on par with the empathy towards the other players, which, in a one shot, if you're playing with unfamiliar people, might, for some folks, obviously there are people that are just naturally more empathic and can pick up on those, even those minute social cues that kind of ping off what, maybe not necessarily an emotional state, but a kind of like state of presence in the moment. There are people that can pick right up on that, but in a one shot kind of situation, there are spots when it might be harder to pick up on that, so you're kind of feeling the table out. But there's still a point of empathy that comes in, just, perhaps noticing that, okay, well, player A is going a lot more quiet than he was when he started off. Could there be something at the table that's causing that? Is that a role-playing moment? Because the character started off this way and now suddenly it's this way. And maybe like that point where, to the person paying attention, or perhaps even to everybody at the table, it could be a good moment for them to maybe kind of step back internally and look around and go, okay, well, was it something I did? Is it something that's happening over there? And that leadership moment or that empathic moment at the table could be to kind of, I guess, look at ways on how you could personally come in and maybe swing that back, which could go push right into inclusion, or a moment of inclusion, like, hey, player A, do you still have this thing? And you could just work that right into the role play or right into the game at the table. Again, to not publicly outcry anything, but to kind of navigate things, to draw them back in, like, I need your help, player A. Come, we can do this together. And that kind of pulls them back in, and maybe can, I guess, try and push past whatever thing was happening in that moment that got them to quiet down or kind of start to shut down a little bit.
Yeah.
I think I just covered like 5 different.
Oh yeah, no. This is all stuff we're gonna deep dive. We're gonna. Yeah, in the months to come, man, we're gonna deep dive into all this stuff, because that is you guys are on it, right? Like, this is totally all of this. I mean, so hopefully this paints a really clear picture to everyone out there that that this is an important thing for your table. And
there are many things kind of intertwined with that leadership that cover a lot of aspects in the table and different moments within.
Yes. Yeah, totally. And this is something I'm so glad we're talking about this, because I feel like this is, like Dave said, like people are talking about it, but do they know what we're talking about, And are there answers out there? There absolutely are. There are so many great resources on how to be a better leader as a person, not just as and a player and a DM. So this is such a rich topic, and I'm really glad that we had a moment here to kind of talk about this. All right, guys. I think this is a wrap on this just sort of this first intro point of like, hey, leadership matters.
Hey, I just have one quick question. Where did this picture come from? What's this picture here?
This is what happens when you don't have leaders in your party, right? Like somebody gets hit with a bar stool and they get knocked off into the well. They fell down the well, and there's no rope.
It's like every race is represented here. It's like a rainbow.
I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe it's a halfling in the back.
It's a bar fight of inclusion.
Yeah,
it is.
No one's left out.
Yeah.
No.
That's true. Everyone is. Oh, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Well, okay. Badass.
Yeah, anyways, cool.
All right, cool.
I hope we at least were able to start scratching the surface there. Folks out there in I guess YouTube land and elsewhere that the kind of aspect of leaders and some of the things that maybe can be looked at your table when you kind of start noticing some of these things.
Yeah.
Hopefully some of those questions have been answered at. Always, I know Jason's probably going to say this. I might be stepping on toes. If you have further questions on this topic, or if you have a similar topic, there's like comments somewhere down here. Like, crack those babies out. Get your typing fingers going. We'd love to hear from you, and hopefully try and help out with some further answers.
Yes, and we actually read those. If you'll look in previous videos, like we try to respond to almost everything that comes through. So please comment. And if you think that this is something that is important to your table, share this message, get it out there, because this is a whole nother dimension to being a good dungeon master or good RPG player, and we think that this is really important. So, help us spread that message, and we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.